Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Gavin.
And I'm Zach.
Mark, nice to meet you guys.
Mark, thanks so much for coming on the show. For anyone that's unaware, you're the mayor of Milwaukie, Oregon, and you recently ran a primary campaign against Kurt Schrader, a centrist Democrat who's represented your district for over a decade now. 2020 was probably the most difficult time in recent political memory to organize a grassroots campaign because door knocking, public interfacing, handshaking, hasn't been as achievable or doable as it has been in past election cycles. We wanted to ask you what it was like trying to launch an insurgent campaign in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, I didn't actually launch during the pandemic. I had actually launched a year in advance of the election. And had I known I was going to be finishing that race in a pandemic, I think we would have strategized a little differently. But trying to pivot from a campaign that was completely centered on door knocking to one where that was not even an option set us back a little bit. It took us a few minutes to figure out what some of the new options were, to find the new technologies for text banking and phone banking, and to put those into operation. And interestingly, it's harder to get volunteers to do those things than it is to knock doors, which surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the left kind of finds itself in a position that not many people thought we might be in 6 or 7 months ago. There was the sort of locomotive momentum from the Sanders campaign that was carrying this progressive spirit across the country. And now it seems like it's almost evaporated. Donald Trump is exhibiting his most fascist behavior, and hundreds of thousands of people are taking to the streets to demand justice. And the best opposition the Democrats seem to be able to muster is the man who architected the very criminal justice policies that are in desperate need of reform, and who has hid in his basement when the country cried out for leadership in the midst of a national health crisis. In your estimation, where does the progressive movement go from here?
Well, so we have two issues that we're in the midst of that the progressives have the right answers to, and I think we need to make sure that we're staying out front as much as we can. I agree. I think Bernie stepping back when he did actually cost me somewhere between 15 and 20% of my votes, or of the final tally, because I think that many people just opted out of the election. But that said, this pandemic really shows to the American people how important it is for us to have a national healthcare system, not one that's based on profits. And I think more Americans are starting to understand that. And this, racial justice movement, I guess, is probably the best phrase. I don't think anybody's actually landed on anything yet. That seems to be sweeping the nation and seems to be holding for a change, is also an opportunity to talk about the differences, and that historically that was created. The whole concept of whiteness was literally created to prop up the 1%. That if you go far enough back in history and you see when those concepts first came into being in the United States, and it wasn't even the United States yet, it had to do with the labor force for the tobacco industry, period. And we have lived with that ever since, and it's literally baked into our Constitution. So our opportunity now is to talk about the fact that this continued system of institutionalized racism is really still about the 1%. It's still about propping up the 1% and increasing their profit margins and continuing to empower them at the detriment of everyone else.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and we're excited to speak to you, especially about your experience as an elected official, a mayor in the town of Milwaukie, Oregon. Can you talk to us a little bit about Milwaukie, Oregon, how you were elected as mayor there, and how you've been able to affect progressive change as that position?
Sure. I ran, God, it's been 12 or 13, I forget, somewhere in there. 12, I guess, would have been the year. I ran for city council, and I ran predominantly because of climate change. I wasn't seeing anybody at any level of government do anything about climate change, and I was seeing the effects occur. I was a National Geographic photographer, and I was seeing the things that were predicted to happen happening much earlier than they had been predicted. And I know how climate change will play out for the human race and the rest of the species that we share this planet with if we don't do something pretty definitive to stop it. So I wasn't a billionaire, so I couldn't run for president, so I ran for city council. Small towns are relatively easy to run for office. There's only 22,000 people, a little bit less than that, in the city of Milwaukie. Most people do not pay attention, they're not engaged, and there's not typically a lot of money thrown at small town races. So I was able to run for city council effectively the first time, got on it, and began to shift that council. So I recruited 2 women to run in the next election to get rid of 2 of the old white men, conservative old white men that were on the council. And so we began to shift the council itself. And then I ran for mayor in 15 and ran unopposed, because the work I'd been doing up till then, I think, made it clear that I was serious about what I was doing and that I was going to actually affect change that would benefit people. And I ran unopposed in my re-election campaign as well.
Were you able to get any change affected in your community? I'm just kind of interested in what legislative abilities, or exactly what role the mayor does do, how, like, what they can do in order to affect change, especially as we're seeing the protests sweeping the nation. So many governors, so many mayors seemingly kind of buckling to the state, city police forces, kind of abdicating the positions of power they hold. Yeah, I'm interested in what your response would be to the kind of intense demonstrations on the streets, and how you would use that position of leadership to actually kind of get things done.
Yeah, so I've attended some of those demonstrations. I've been part of them. We have affected progressive change. So we passed one of the strongest climate action plans in the state and have moved to install that. We've wrote a really powerful vision that was a big community project, brought the entire community together to create this vision. And the vision, the first sentence in the vision says, in 2040, Milwaukie will be a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable. And then we began to do work on things like our comprehensive plan and the climate action plan that would then do the things that our vision called for. So in the realm of equity and racial justice, something that you may or may not be aware of is that the whole concept of single family zoning, single family housing, was created specifically to disenfranchise Black Americans and all people of color, but it was particularly aimed at Black Americans. And so we are reversing whatever it is, 60, 80 years of zoning in our comprehensive plan that we are actually literally in the middle of the hearings. We've had 4 hearings, I think, so far, and we've got another one coming up in 2 weeks, which I think will finally pass it at that point. But that our new comp plan aims to reverse that zoning, that type of zoning, so that we can begin to reverse the effects of disenfranchising Black Americans from owning property, which disenfranchises them from amassing wealth. Most Americans, what little wealth they amass through home ownership. And we have systematically disenfranchised African Americans, Black Americans, from doing that. So that is a change that we've had in process now for 3 years, I guess, and it's slow. Everything's slow with government. If you're actually going to make changes that will stick, that will be effective, and not just make some grand proclamation that we're doing this thing, which is only going to last as long as you're in office, right? If you want things that are actually going to make systematic changes that will stick, they have to be baked into things like the comprehensive plan, like the code and policies. So that's the process we're in. I just announced last night at the council meeting that we're going to create a task force of the BIPOC community to be able to work with me, work with our chief of police, work with our newly elected DA, work with the head of health, housing, and human services at Clackamas County, which is the entity that provides us with social services. Small towns tend not to have social service departments. We're just too small. But to work with all of those entities to see how we start to weed out the policies and the codes and there's so many things intrinsically weaved into everything about our governance that is designed to disenfranchise and impoverish and hold down and jail people of color. And we are going to have to go through that piece by piece, thread by thread, and pull that out. And I don't know what I don't know, right? I'm an old white man. I have not had the lived experience of a person of color. I don't know what they experience. I don't know that this innocuous looking piece of code that was written 40 years ago does X to someone, right? So that's why I want to seat this committee, this task force of people of color to work with me to go through all of those things and figure out, okay, what changes do we need to make? What are our hiring practice changes? What are our policies? What policies do we need to add? What policies do we need to get rid of? But if we want to change things in a lasting way, we have to do it systematically like that. Making grand pronouncements and saying, I am banning the use of tear gas is great. And that works exactly as long as I'm in office, right? And if there's a pendulum swing and the next mayor is conservative, then they can easily and very quietly reverse that. So this is why I'm so systematic about what I do.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've seen a few insurgent Congress people elected without taking corporate PAC money, but once they're in Congress, they kind of fall at the mercy of Nancy Pelosi and party leadership, and that very decidedly does take corporate money. And as a former congressional candidate endorsed by brand new Congress, do you think that it's a meaningful strategy to get insurgent progressives into the Democratic Party, despite still not having reasonable campaign finance laws and the Citizens United campaign Supreme Court ruling?
Is it a meaningful strategy? It absolutely is. It's making the statement, and it's attempting to set us up to never be the kind of Congress people that will be dependent on corporate money. Is it a winning strategy? I mean, I can point to how I lost this race, right? Kurt Schrader dropped, we don't have the final numbers yet, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 million on TV ads, on 5 big colorful mailers that went out to hundreds of thousands of people. I couldn't compete with that, not even close. And that will be the advantage that people with a lot of money have. However, I strongly believe that if we are going to change the system, we have to get people elected to office without that money, because once you are in their pockets, you are in their pockets. And I don't care how good a person you are. I don't care if you are a bloody saint. Once you have been accepting their money, you will be in a relationship with them that will cause you to think differently about the things they ask you to do. And it's never, not never, very often the thing they ask you to do, it sounds innocuous. right? It's just change this one word in this law that you're about to pass. It just will make the world a difference to our business, and it really won't affect the purpose of this law. And the reality is, because they have reams of brilliant lawyers looking at this stuff, they know that just that one word gives them the loophole they need to continue doing what they're doing or to do worse things than what they're doing. And so I need to be in a position where I'm not even interested in hearing what they have to say, right? When the head of Exxon walks into my door, he gets exactly the same level of hearing from me as when you walk in my door. Right? I will listen to you just as readily as I will listen to him. If I am not in that position, I cannot be as effective in making those changes. So you're right. AOC and the squad and the handful of others are not being as effective as they could be. We have to continue to replace the status quo, Democrats and Republicans, slowly, strategically, and until we get to a point where we have enough people in Congress that they absolutely need our vote, right? If the progressives are, 1/4 of the Democrats, and we say, no, we will not vote on this bill until you change this language, we will vote against it. We will vote with the Republicans against this if you don't change this language. Then we have some real power. Then we can actually affect change. But we have to reach a critical mass of those kind of people in office. And, brand new Congress, I love those guys. I love Justice Democrats. They're trying. We have to be more organized, more strategic. We have to figure out, okay, in this state, let's replace this person. Let's concentrate on that person. Let's get a really great candidate to run against them. Let's get some cash behind them. Let's find them an amazing team of people to work for them. And let's get that person in office. The way the system is currently working, it's whoever throws their hat in the ring, and we try and support as many of them as we can, and we're spread thin, and we lose most of those races. I think we could be more strategic about it, but that's me, and I'm not going to be leading that effort because I'm trying to fix the city.
That's fair. We were just talking to Lisa Savage this morning, who's running Green Party in Maine for the Senate seat. Would you ever consider running with the Greens or maybe a third party run at all in the future?
Had Bernie, my hope after 2016 was that as soon as we assumed Hillary was elected, Bernie would form a new party. He would pivot and say, okay, we need a third party in this country that is actually working for the betterment of the people, not for the 1%. If he had done that, then in 2018, when AOC and all those guys got into office, that party started growing and gaining real relevance. Then I would consider running in a party like that. Right now, the Greens, the Working Family Party, the Independents, the Progressive Party, there are so many people that literally are going to vote who's got the D behind their name, who's got the R behind their name. They're not going to look at the candidate. They're not going to consider the difference. They're going to vote one of the two parties. So until we can get, like I said, enough people that we can create a party with relevance, and whether that's combining the Greens and the Working Family Party, or forming the DSA, or I don't know what that looks like, but we will continue to lose. I mean, there have been good candidates that have run Green Party, good people, absolutely good people. I know some of them, and they would have been outstanding Congress people. I cannot see that happening. I think it's highly, highly unlikely.
That's fair. Well, a slight pivot. I wanted to talk about recreational cannabis. Oregon was one of the first states to fully legalize cannabis recreationally and medicinally. And despite the progress that has been made nationally, cannabis is still a federally banned substance. In your experience as a mayor and a citizen, how has having legal cannabis affected the state of Oregon?
in no bad ways whatsoever. We're collecting a little bit of taxes, not nearly as much as they had hoped they would collect. I think it's as available as it was. I think we are seeing more of it grown organically. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I think what we've seen is the prices go down because it's legalized. That's also a good thing. I have seen zero data that says that this was bad in any way. Less people are in jail.
Yeah.
So we're spending less money jailing people for the horrible crime of possessing,
It seems like in a time of uproar like this, an easy kind of bone to throw to the protesters would be the fact that the Democrats could legalize marijuana and expunge the drug records. Kind of moving us in a step in the right direction against this war on drugs. I find it a little bit surprising that they've been reluctant to do so. Do you think that's in the future for the Democratic Party?
God, I hope so. It seems so stupid that we're still arguing about this. This seems like a done deal. But if you look at prohibition and how that then got reversed, it was just literally enough states passed it that the federal government was like, well, I guess we should legalize it. I always go back to who's making money, right? Where's the money being made? And prohibition had a hard time because there were people making vast sums of money off of producing alcohol and distributing alcohol illegally. And they would support specific politicians to keep it illegal. So it was in the best interest of the mob to keep alcohol illegal. They were making fortunes. So there are people right now making fortunes off of keeping marijuana illegal. Then you go to the whole racial thing, right? It helps them, it helps white America keep the black man down. It is a tool in their toolbox for being able to arrest as many as possible of black Americans. So the South will be the last place to legalize marijuana for that reason alone. It's yeah. Sorry.
No, it's definitely, it's one of those kind of head scratchers. It's for so many people, especially in 2020. I mean, it's so innocuous, and I mean, if you want to even call it a crime at all, it would be it's like jaywalking. To think that there are people who have lost years of their lives to it, it's sort of
people have been killed.
Been killed. Yeah, exactly. Lost their entire lives. It's ridiculous.
And the fact that the current Democratic nominee is someone who still repeats language about how it's a gateway drug and how there needs to be more research done. These kind of tired conservative right-wing cliches about cannabis, which have been pretty much thoroughly debunked by now. And I mean, you're the mayor of a town in Oregon and a citizen of Oregon, and you're telling us right now that there haven't been any problems, any increased violence, any data points that would suggest that it's an issue. So yeah, I think it's pretty ridiculous that the Democrats aren't leading the charge on that one, especially given the unrest we see in the streets, as Zach pointed out. So yeah, thanks for speaking about that. One more question we had for you is just, do you have any more plans for the future? Another congressional run down the pipeline maybe, or are you just focusing on Milwaukie, Oregon at the moment?
Well, both. We have a lot of things to fix. We still have a lot of work to do in Milwaukie and statewide. I've always tried to expand what we're doing out into the greater metro region and into the state at the state level, and we've been pretty effective. We've changed some housing rules. We've caused some good things to happen. So I'll keep doing that. My intention right now is to run for Congress again in 22. Because Oregon is likely picking up another congressional seat, it's up in the air where I will even be, right? The districts could change enough. I could be in one of 3 different districts. I could be in the 5th, like I am now, I could be in the new 6th congressional district, or I could be in the 3rd congressional district. All depends on how they draw the maps.
Interesting. Well, we definitely look forward to seeing another congressional bid from you if one comes, and we'd love to talk to you some more when that day arrives.
Yeah, happy to. So yeah, ping me in about a year, and you'll know what I'm doing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark.
Anytime.